Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Komie's Homies. I've got my main homie Sam Carr here, and today we have a very special guest, Tim Klitch. Tim Klitch is an owner of the Major League Pickleball team, the Texas Ranchers. He is opening facilities around the Austin area, and possibly more. Tim has a background in commercial banking and was excellent tennis player in college and beyond, and as an adult. So thank you for being here, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks for having me.
Good to have you.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and my father was a D1 athlete at Miami University and played basketball and tennis. My dad and my uncle were both drafted into the NBA. My dad by the Minneapolis Lakers and my uncle by the New York Knicks.
That's a pretty good pedigree.
And the athletic talent stopped there.
Come on. And when we're talking Miami University, we're not talking about Miami, Florida, where I'm from. We're talking about Miami of Ohio.
The real Miami.
What's their team name?
We're the Red Hawks now. We were the Redskins when I was there.
Okay, right. Okay, and so your dad played tennis. Did he introduce you to tennis?
Yes, and sports and tennis in particular has always been big in our family because my dad grew up the son of a night watchman at a steel factory in southern Ohio, basically in Appalachia. And they never had a car, never had a phone, never owned a house. He was poor. And the only reason he got to college and got out of Portsmouth, Ohio, was because of sports. And so we've always viewed sports as just an integral part of our lives.
And I know your sister is a great player as well.
She is good. She is number 2 rated player in our family, but she's been as high as number 1. She's won the Worlds two years in a row. I think 20 and 21 or 21 and 22. She won the Worlds in women's 55 singles in tennis.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. So she's number 1 in the world, but 2 in your family.
That's what I say.
Okay. All right. Did your dad, he was a tennis pro, and he taught you and your sister the game?
Correct. And my sister was a natural. She was competitive. She loved it. And she just took off with it. I was a little bit of a lost soul growing up. And so I had some talent, but not the right amount of drive. So she turned pro at age 15.
Wow.
And I kind of, as I was getting out of high school, I was not recruited by any D1 programs. Went to a D3 school, Kalamazoo College in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Everybody knows that for nationals. Did not enjoy my time there. Left, transferred to Miami of Ohio, figuring, tennis is over. And I walked on the team and made it on the team. And I was 17 when I went away to college. So I was younger, not very physically or mentally mature. And then I kind of had a late growth spurt and figured it out when I was 19 or 20 and had a good 2 years, won 3 MAC titles at Miami and did well in the NCAA regional indoors one year. And, really kind of grew to love tennis and love sport. But in a way, as much as I look back and go, oh gosh, I woulda, coulda, shoulda, I'm glad I did it the way I did, because most of my buddies who were good at 14 were burned out by 18. And then the ones that were good at 18 and played hard through college all quit after they couldn't make it on the pro tour. And I'm still having fun with it. So I think I did it right.
Yeah, and if I remember a story right, you had a certain streak of wins at one time when you were at Miami of Ohio.
Yeah, I think I think it was my senior year when I finally got in the singles lineup, and I think I was playing at Flagler College in somewhere or in Florida, maybe it was Rollins, one of those schools in Florida, and we were on our spring break, and I lost a first set after choking to this guy, and I got so pissed at myself that I just said, okay, I'm done losing. and I'm not losing anymore. If someone beats me, that's different, but I'm not losing anymore. And I shifted my mindset, and I won every match the rest of the year, except for the one my coach disqualified me for throwing my racket. So there's an asterisk there.
Okay. All right. Very good. Um, so you graduated from Miami of Ohio, and is that where you met your wife?
No, I when I was graduating in '83, the economy in the Midwest was kind of in the tank, and I didn't want to stay in Ohio, so I just decided Texas would be a good place to come. And through my sister, I met one of the sponsors of a pro tennis tournament who hired me in Houston, moved to Houston to work for him, and then realized pretty quickly that I didn't like North Houston all that well. And everybody kept saying, "Young man, you need to be in Austin, Texas." And so I came over to Austin, fell in love with it right away, got a job with the bank, and then about a year later met my now wife.
Going back, was it Mattress Mac that you
No, actually, his name was
worked for?
Alan Kent, and he had a company called Kent Electronics, and he was in construction, oil and gas, and everything. And the amazing thing about him is I almost died in a plane crash with him here at Windermere Airstrip
No.
out by Willie's Golf Course, out
No.
by the lake. And he's been in at least 3 plane crashes that I know of and walked away. And so I'm never riding. And notice to the world: do not ride in an aircraft with Alan Kent.
So, all right, we'll pass up that. I was thinking it was Mattress Mac and the National
No.
Clay Courts. Okay, it wasn't that. So you came.
But he did take my sister to her pro match at the Virginia Slims in Houston in a helicopter one time. So he liked to fly helicopters around Houston.
Sam, there's already a lot of plane and helicopter talk, and we're just getting going. This is the first. All right, so you did you start in commercial banking, or did you grow into commercial banking?
So I started off at Texas Commerce Bank in 1984 here in Austin, and did that. I worked at that bank for about 9 years. I was commercial real estate and then commercial lending. Then I left and went to Merrill Lynch for about 8 or 9 years, and then I did the last 20 years or so at Comerica Bank.
So when you went to Merrill Lynch, were you like a financial advisor?
No, I was actually a commercial lender at Merrill Lynch because they were starting a business banking function. And so I had about 300 financial advisors that referred business to me, and I worked with them.
And when you switched jobs, was it a headhunter that got you, or you were actively recruited from your three career changes?
It was word of mouth through friends of friends that got me out, and the banking community's fairly tight. And and the one good thing I did every time I left a job was I left. My goal in leaving every job was to be able to go back if it didn't work out.
You're a smart guy.
And so I never burned a bridge. And so I always wanted to get walked out the door and get shown the exit, but they would be like, "Okay, Tim, we know you're going to work for a competitor, but we need you for 2 more weeks to grind this work out." And so I would do it.
You would. Okay. And now that background in commercial banking must be super helpful to you now that you are basically opening pickleball facilities where it's much needed in the area of Austin.
Absolutely. And it's the financial management and the discipline and the knowing that if you're not paying your bills, you can't have a business. Number one, but then I think part of banking that maybe I stayed a few decades too long in it, but you really do learn risk management, and risk management to me is always thinking about what can go wrong, and so it's funny. My partner Dan Keelan laughs at me all the time because he's like, "How are you a banker? You're always the aggressive guy trying to do all this stuff." But in the back of my mind, or at the forefront of my mind, always is what can go wrong, and I just plan on everything to go wrong because it usually does. It's just a question of when, and the more prepared you are for it, the less of an impact it has.
I mean, you navigated the original Austin Pickle Ranch thing. I mean, I know the city put you through hell, but you came out smelling like a rose because of how the property appreciated.
Well, that's timing and luck, but that got drawn out almost 3 years. But one of the big things I learned from that process is whatever you think the time and cost is going to be, double both of those, and don't have debt. And if you have debt on a startup when you have unforeseen paths, you're asking for trouble. And so everybody I know who's done a startup and has had, debt or equity that had debt like components to it, they've ended up, getting hurt. And I paid cash for the land. And I was paying cash for the development. Now I had to bring a partner in because I couldn't carry it all myself. But that's part of my, I, I, I joke around and tell people I bet the ranch on the ranch.
Yeah.
Because at the time I did that, I took my retirement savings and I bought that land.
Well, I mean, Austin exploded after you did. Your timing was amazing.
Yeah, and I gotta say, in mid 2020, the pandemic was raging full bore, and the housing market was kind of frozen in the early part of 2020. I bought the land. I think it was June of 20, and I really thought that I might be making a mistake, but I did it, and then about 2 weeks after I closed on the land, Tesla announced that they were coming to town, and they bought that big tract over right off by the airport on the kind of southeast side of town, generally speaking, where my land was. So that certainly helped. But through the, I'm not a professional land developer, which you can tell if you saw how my process went, because I didn't do it well.
Yeah.
But our city is so intent on erecting barriers that really oftentimes serve no useful purpose, that there was a time when I thought my land was going to be worthless because the city declared a river through the center of my property and was going to make it undevelopable, and I wouldn't have been able to sell it for anything. And I now understand why real estate developers make extraordinarily large profits when they do it right, because the risk is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's almost like biopharmacy. It's like you can win big or you could lose big.
Yeah. I've used to bank tech companies like, biotech companies, and, for every one that made it, 10 of them went poof.
So you bet your retirement on it, but you probably thought you were making a lot more conservative bet than you were.
If I'd have known what I knew 2 years later, I probably wouldn't have had the guts to do it.
Yeah.
So.
But now it's like the appreciation because of Tesla and everything like that. So, you're doing well. Are you planning just to hold that property, or is it ever going to become an Austin Pickle Ranch?
Now that the sport has grown so much and become mainstream, because 3 years ago when I started down this path, or almost 4, when I mentioned the word pickleball to my business associates, they were like, "What are you talking about?" Nobody in the general world knew about this sport or thought anything of it. And so I think that it wasn't mainstream. It wasn't a great idea at the time, but at least I bought the land with the intent of doing a specific purpose with it. But really, I owe that all to Steve Kuhn, because in 2019, when I had the land under option to buy it, I met Steve. And he was at a Wimbledon watch party. A friend had invited me to fly over to London to watch Federer and Nadal play in the semis of Wimbledon in 19. And so I flew over, watched the match, had dinner, and flew home. And didn't even take a suitcase. I didn't take any clothes. I didn't even take a toothbrush with me. And so I went over there, and then I watched the finals the Sunday with Steve Kuhn and a bunch of people downtown at a sports bar. And so when I told him I had this land and what I was thinking of doing at that time, an urban tennis resort, he was like, "What do you think about pickleball?" And it was kind of like, I always forget which movie. Was it The Plastics? Was that Goodbye Columbus or The Graduate? It was one of those from the 70s. And
Sam's 30, he doesn't know. And I'm old and I don't know.
So Steve said pickleball. And so I went over to his house that night and played for the first time.
Wow.
And I was a tennis player, and I played like a tennis player, and I kept hitting the third ball, the returns out of the air, because I only got one direction in life, and that's going forward.
Yeah, you were going to serve and volley.
And so I kept stepping in front and hitting it. After about the 40th or 50th, violation, I finally figured it out and started playing, but I kept trying to hit it too hard and hit drop shots and, stupid tennis player shots. And so by the end of the 3 hours, and I don't know if this story is still true today, but Steve said in the 3 hours we played that day, I improved more than anybody he ever saw. And so it was nice to hear that from Steve.
Well, I mean, your game with continental grip and being a serve and volley, or a guy that's going to keep the ball low, that's going to come to the net and volley. I mean, pickleball was made for you.
Well, and you probably haven't really seen me play tennis, but I play tennis like I did this when I played against the Bryan brothers, and they were like, "Dude, what are you doing?" You know, the saber or the sneak attack by Roger,
Oh,
where he
yeah.
would come in. I just stand about 10 feet in front of the baseline to return serve. And a lot of guys think, you're crazy. I'm going to blow you off the court. Well, the reality is, I'm slow, and I know I can't get to wide balls, so I'd rather cut the angles off. So I've always had good hands. And so that's helped me be a good pickleball player because I've played a lot of half volleys and quick balls. And so I just have grass is my favorite tennis surface. And if you're a good grass court tennis player, you will be a good pickleball player.
Right.
A good clay court tennis player is not a good pickleball player.
Right. And that's generally because the ball doesn't come up much on grass, just like
Exactly.
a pickleball doesn't come up.
And you want to get it, if you can, before it bounces.
Right. Yeah, we just had Zane in here, and we were trying to figure out, like, well, how does a guy who's a mid lineup D3 tennis player get so good at pickleball? And, well, he couldn't serve over his head very well, and he couldn't hit high forehands, but he could take balls on the rise and move it around. And it sounds same as you. The person who takes the ball off the rise and kind of dictates position has an advantage, and it translates really well.
I agree.
All right, so I never knew that Steve Kuhn introduced you to pickleball.
You know, everything that I've done in pickleball was because of Steve.
There's a lot of us out here.
Yeah.
So when did you play pickleball again? And I know you built a pickleball court at your house. That you did that quickly after you got exposed to the game, right?
Yeah, and it was a couple of events. So I met Steve in 19, and a month after I met Steve, I was on a dirt bike in Telluride, Colorado, and I went over the handlebars and shattered my collarbone, broke 3 ribs, and almost killed myself. And I had 2 surgeries and spent about 6 months with my left arm in a sling. And so, needless to say, tennis and yoga and Pilates were off the table. So the one sport I could play was pickleball. And that really, after Steve, trying to sell me on pickleball, and then me living through being severely injured and realizing it was really the only thing I could do that was keeping me sane. I had a sport court on my backyard from we had put in our house in 1995. And so we're in 2019, so 24 years. And that sport court, the tiles had been baking in the Texas sun for 24 years, and they needed to go.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I got to redo it. Steve had turned me on to pickleball. I was like, if I'm going to go into pickleball, I ought to build my own court and put a lab in my backyard and see how it goes. So what I did it, and I was, and so fortunately I had a 75 by 35 concrete slab. I built the biggest sport court I could build without taking out a tree, and put that in back in 95. And so when we reconditioned the concrete, and I had Cortex come out and do the work on it, they did an awesome job. Can't say enough good things about Weston Reddy and his team. They hauled off my tiles, redid my court, put it in. And while I was still, injured, I started having my son's peers from college and coaching them at Wea Youth Basketball over. And I'd say, okay, you guys bring your girlfriends over Saturday night at 6 o'clock. Let's just do a barbecue and bring a few beers and let's play pickleball. And we'd do that at 6 o'clock on a Saturday night. And at 11 o'clock that same Saturday night, I'd finally say, guys, you got to go home. And they're like, Mr. Klitch, this is awesome.
So much
we
fun.
would do this all the time if we could. And so basically I had a lab in my backyard that I was using as a, test lab, see what people thought about the sport.
And I guess you saw how much fun it was, what I'm hearing, and it's a very addictive sport. And I guess then you had your ear to the kind of the pavement, and you could tell that the sport was growing quickly.
Yeah, and so I got some of those sports fitness industry reports and started doing my own research, and then playing and watching, and I thought the sport was poised to take off.
Yeah, I remember talking to you a couple times about it. It was just like, oh, we were here and we're all new to it. It was like COVID. I think, did you start COVID, Sam?
I actually, your house was actually one of the first places that I would go and play at.
Yeah.
You were like, let's come over here and play.
Yeah.
So me and Simon, my twin, we would just go play at your house all the time.
Yeah.
So random times, you would have like 2 or 3 different groups staggered out.
Yeah, because I retired from the bank in May of 19.
Yeah.
So I had a little bit freer schedule after that.
So everybody's coming on in COVID. We're hearing how big it is. And then Steve being, I remember one time you came to my house and you played with me and Steve and Brooks. And, you know, he was talking about Major League Pickleball as just an idea and Duper is just an idea.
Yep.
And I guess you and he had been close enough where at some point he offered, I guess, for you to buy one of his teams.
Yeah, and I think, you know, he knew I was in the development process of the Pickle Ranch, so he knew I was kind of all in on the sport and all in on it. And so when he brought it up to me, I remember talking to a couple of my buddies, and I don't know Lauren Abney that well, but I know he owned the W World Team Tennis Austin franchise, which I think he's moved to Southern Cal, and he joked around that, you know, a sports franchise is the gift that always keeps giving, because you get capital calls all the time, and so don't buy it unless you're willing to keep funding it. So my expectation going into this, evaluating this investment, was, I don't know if people were really ready to sit around and watch pickleball on TV or the internet. I don't know if the pro game's real, but since I was building a brand, the Austin Pickle Ranch, it kind of made sense to me as a form of advertising to own a team and name it. You know, originally it was the Pickle Ranchers, and then we were the Ranchers, and then when they asked us to have a geographic identity, we adopted the name the Texas Ranchers.
You were never Austin Pickle Ranchers?
No, because ATX pickleballers had kind of they had made their original identity Austin, and frankly, I wanted to be Texas's team, not Austin's team, and so I wanted to be a little bit of a bigger franchise in my mind, or a bigger drawing area.
Okay, and I guess you went in with a partner and went ahead and decided to go ahead and buy the team. Could you tell us your thought process about make you want to say yes? With just a little background, because I remember at the time, you know, the stadiums for pro events sometimes had 40 people in the stands.
Yeah,
and the live stream would have Ben Johnsby playing a great match against. We usually always playing Tyson back then,
right?
You know, and there was 250 on there.
Yeah.
So,
well, and you know, in the final analysis, I looked at it and said, you know, the buy-in price was fairly nominal. And I figured that I was going to have a pretty substantial marketing budget when I got the ranch built. I was going to have $10 million invested in it. And, you know, it's a B2C business, and you got to spend money on advertising, marketing, PR. So I thought I basically I stole some of the money, not really, borrowed some of the money from my future marketing budget and put it into the purchase price of the team. Because
you thought they were symbiotic.
Yeah, I just figured having our name out there as the Ranchers would help the ranch be more successful. And I got to say, it really did, because people, when I go to events, I didn't really realize the importance of image and identity, and you know, shame on me for not wearing my cowboy hat.
That's what I thought. I was surprised.
I should have, but when I go to Texas Ranchers events and any MLP event, I'm in my cowboy hat, my boots, and I wear my spurs. And so when everybody hears me jangling along the walkways, everybody goes, "Oh yeah, you own the Texas Ranchers." And so I did end up really helping the brand. And this is funny to hear a finance guy talk about this stuff, because, you know, I was just a banker my whole life. And so, you know, I went into advertising and marketing and branding, so I didn't really grasp it, but it really worked.
Yeah. And, you know, it had kind of humble beginnings. I remember we were there, Sam, at Dreamland, the first one, I guess. So you acted as general manager of your, you do the draft.
Yeah. So in the beginning, my partner was Brian Sheffield, who's an energy guy, who's really smart guy, totally into tennis. He's a tennis nut. He wants to beat me in tennis really bad. You're never going to do it, Sheffield.
That's never going to happen.
Hold your breath. And so when I talked to him about this, I kind of talked him into it. And he doesn't quite have the same passion for pickleball that I did, but he's a part owner. Well, he's the Drop Shot series that does the ATX Open in tennis. He's an investor, I think a limited partner in the Texas MLS team, and so this fit in his sports portfolio.
And it works for you, right? Because then you have somebody that has experience with sports teams.
Absolutely, and whenever you're going into something that's probably going to have red ink and require capital calls, part of being the banker is it's good to share those capital calls with somebody and not have to do them all yourself.
Right.
And so what Brian and I worked out a deal was we'd go in together on the deal, but I'd run it and then I kind of paid for all the marketing. So, the name was more aligned with my brand, not his oil and gas brand. And so it kind of benefited me to cover the operating costs of the branding and travel and just team funding stuff. And then when the opportunity came at the end of 22 to bring in some new partners, we did that.
I want to get to that, but in the initial number of teams, can you remind me, was it 12?
It was 8.
It was 8.
We started off with 8 teams. That first event in October of 21 in Dreamland. And, the first day, it was a 3-day event, I think. And the Friday morning, there were not very many
there was
people
nobody there.
and we learned a good thing. And my sister was the commissioner then.
Oh, okay.
And that's another story about how I dragged my sister kicking and screaming into pickleball.
Yeah.
But so she was the commissioner. She ran the draft, and she wasn't in charge of all the operational stuff. But in a small startup, everybody does everything. And so they learned a lesson not to have seats across from the camera that are white with a yellow ball flying that are empty.
Yeah.
Because the camera couldn't pick up the pickleball.
Yeah.
As it was traveling, but from that bad first session and day, and here you got to give Steve Kuhn. There are times when that dude is just brilliant. I mean, he's way smarter than me, and what he did with the Dream Breaker, the concept of MLP, the format of it, the 2 guys, 2 gals, the equality, and then the Dream Breaker.
The Dream Breaker's brilliant.
The Dream Breaker made it. I still remember the first Dream Breaker I saw when Lee Whitwell slapped Deckel bar around. Sorry, Deckel, to give you some grief about that.
It wasn't. Oh yeah. Oh, that's right. She won like all 4 points.
I think
hitting
she
winners.
swept 4 points. and ever since then, the male top players, when they're playing the women in singles, they're nervous. They're tight. And now they've learned not to chip and charge. They stay back until they get a better ball to attack on. So the guys have all gotten smarter. And so in the beginning, the point spread was not wide between the men and the women. It's probably widened over time because they've learned to be a little more patient.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting hearing Steve talk about all these things. We'd go play pickleball, but then as soon as you sit down, he's just got so many ideas that they're just flowing out of him. And to see them come to fruition to where it became later, it just all flowed from his mind.
And I got to admit, a lot of us fought him on the Dream Breaker. And there was a lot of things we were like, Steve, you're wrong. And he just stuck to his guns, and he was right. And so there's a lot of stuff there. Like, I did not like the way they did the lineup, where I thought you should have just both blindly turned your lineups in. And he's like, no, we can create some drama by having one team do the lineup, the other gets to respond, and then flip it for the Dream Breaker. And later on, that came to be how we qualified out of pool play, was that setup. And so there are just some fine nuances that he's a really smart guy.
So the first one, we were there, Sam. I mean, we could grab a beer and get anywhere we wanted and just watch.
On the other side to the right, they were just chairs.
Yeah.
They didn't have the bleachers set up.
Yeah.
It was just the chairs.
Well, we had the grandstand court.
Yeah.
Where there's like a couple rows of chairs.
Yeah. It was just the chairs.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were just walking around. You said, hey, you need to come over here. I was at work and, working for you.
Yeah, Sam works for me. I told me, you need to leave work because you need to drink beer with me over at this event.
You need to go. And it was like, we were like the only two guys that were just going from one.
Well, I got it. You kind of qualify in super fan territory for MLP. So thank you.
Yes. I mean, I feel like I've been in it from the beginning. I never bought a team, and I hate to admit this, but if he offered for me to buy a team, I would have said no.
Yeah.
And so,
you know what? And that would have been the right decision unless A, you're just like crazy. And we got some billionaires in there that understand pro sports. And it only made sense for me because it fit my underlying business.
right.
And that I didn't mind funding capital calls out of my operating budget down the road. So it only made sense for certain people in certain circumstances.
So let's go like chronologically a little bit. So we had that first very humble beginning with 8 teams. What happened next? Didn't he sell some more teams soon thereafter?
Well, so I can't remember that. Well, it was it ended up being, it wasn't a commercial success. We didn't make money, but the product, everybody saw that product capture
The players
attention.
loved it.
And the players' level of enthusiasm.
It was insane.
It was really fun.
Yeah.
And, I think the tours have a product that I guess, what was that old podcast that Ben and Rob used to do where fundamentally
something
flawed
boys.
was their word.
Yeah.
There's a fundamental flaw when in this sport, because it's so new and there's a couple of super dominant players, if those super dominant players partner up, they're not going to lose very often. And, looking at Ben and Colin, they're so darn good playing together that it kind of makes the tour play a little less dramatic when you don't feel uncertainty about the outcome. But with MLP, crazy stuff happens. I mean, I've been to every single MLP except one. And the one I didn't go to?
Which one?
The one we won. And so Newport last year, I had a preset sailing trip on a buddy's, my business partner's sailing boat on Lake Huron. And so it wasn't broadcast in Canada. So I had to go into port, call my wife, have her put her phone up to the TV. And I did a FaceTime call over a Wi-Fi network, watching the TV feed on my iPhone, cheering on the back of a boat in Canada.
Who was on?
We were there.
We were there. Yeah, we were there. We were rooting for your
Thanks
team.
for rooting
You
for
should have told me that. You said if I would have known, I would put you on the court.
Yeah.
But who was on? Was that when would you have DJ on your team?
Well, that was kind of the one that put me on the map, as some people saying I might actually know something about pickleball, because we didn't. So I had Anna, and Anna and originally Maggie Brascia.
Yeah.
And then I had DJ and Austin Gridley, and we came in 11th out of 12 in the first event. So I
shuffled Gridley out.
I
quick.
traded Maggie for Jackie, and a lot of people were really mad that
Yes,
I
remember this now.
got the better end of that trade, as it turned out. And then I cut Gridley, which I hated to do. He's a nice guy and a good player, but his style of play does not fit MLP style.
No, we played with him at Newport.
And so right before that, the PPA was in Austin, and Anna, I think Anna and a bunch of other people had been staying at my house, and James was just coming on the scene, and she was like, you need to draft James.
Yes.
And so I saw him hit. He was hitting in my backyard, and I got to know him. And so I was like, when you're 11th place, you don't stand pat. I mean, it's like when you got crappy cards in 5-card draw poker, or draw poker, you throw your bad cards back. So I did that, and I still remember the what is it, NML, Pickleball No Man's Land. They kind of called me out, and I would go on the website and say, hey, you may be right, but I had to do something. And then James was just coming on, and so I kind of grabbed onto him while he was not known, and then we won the next event, made it to the finals, semis of the next one in Columbus, and so that was what put us on the map.
Where did the part come in? Where were you, like, as a team when they started threatening Vibe, and so that there had to be like, okay, that's when the letter of intent came, that maybe these two the PPA is going to merge with MLP?
So I think that the exclusive contracts came at the end of 21. So after the first MLP, if I look back and say, what could we have done differently? When we created MLP, it was so apparent to everybody it was going to be a success. The one thing we could have done differently was put in people's contracts that you couldn't sign another contract that called for exclusivity, because Steve is such a good-hearted human being who wants the best for the players that he's not a devious guy in my mind. And so he didn't think, oh, I want to lock these guys down. He was like, hey, I want to provide another income stream. I want these pro players to make it so they can play on the tour and MLP, and we'll just work around the other tours and be a supplement to their income and to their professional lives.
Yeah, like as Zane said, he didn't look at the players as an asset.
Right. Steve really wanted, he loved playing with those players and being on the court with them and seeing them succeed. He really wanted the best for them, and he still does to this day. So the PPA, they were the ones that took the first shot and banned all their players. And at the time, their position was, we need to keep the standards up, and we need to have this exclusivity so that we can have a better tour and all this. And they just wanted to control the assets and make them all theirs. So they locked all the top players who signed those exclusive contracts down. And so we had a little bit of a struggle in the beginning of 22 because we lost Ben, we lost Tyson, we lost maybe we kept Tyson, I forget who all, but we lost a lot of the top name players. And so we, in 22, had to make it without them. And so we did okay the first event. We did better the second event. And then Columbus, I think, was what brought the PPA to the bargaining table again was, and here, I just got to give David Cass and Ruth and his whole team up in Columbus. Columbus has a shockingly strong pickleball community. And that Thursday, we didn't have Challenger back then. So we started on Friday morning, 9 a.m. The stands were full. It was rocking.
This was that indoor facility.
At Pickle and Chill now, but it was David Cass's indoor tennis club. And man, they got the people out. I mean, there were so many people there. There was nowhere for them to park. They were parking illegally, and the cops were threatening to tow all the cars. And David Cass had to call the mayor of Columbus and pull an emergency event permit just to deal with it. And so they got through that. But, I think there were 2,000, 3,000 people there. And
Komie, you went to that one, yeah?
Yeah, we were up in the VIP. I saw
that was when we.
That was the best VIP ever.
Yeah, and they
you look down and
revamped that whole area. I was just on the phone with Ruth Milligan today up there, and so they've rebuilt that whole upper mezzanine area. But that event was so successful. The fans loved it. I mean, I just, that's when I knew this thing was going to go. So then after that, we signed the peace treaty with PPA in December of 22.
Didn't they first say that they were going to start Vibe, and they had Mark Cuban as an owner, and they tried to, that's what I wanted to ask you. I felt like they put the fear in the owners that a competing league could be really bad, so that made you all, or at least Steve, want to go to the table and work with somebody that had been kind of bad to him before.
Yeah, they and I can't remember exactly when Vibe came out, but I've joked around with people before saying, in my view, Vibe was like a Hollywood movie set. It was like a facade, and then you look behind it, and there's really nothing there.
That's what I thought.
It didn't exist. It was just a logo and a name, and you get somebody like powerful and wealthy and clearly a proven winner in business and sports like Mark Cuban behind it. They could have done something with it, but it would just been a knockoff of what MLP was, and so. But at the end of the day, I think when you have growing, newfound sport, new things, you're just better off collaborating than fighting in general, as long as the two people who are collaborating truly intend to collaborate.
You know,
That's where I don't think
you're right. Because even before all that happened, there was an initial meeting where I think Steve wanted to collaborate
yes.
with Dundon and Connor Pardo, and I think he was totally blindsided by the response that he got.
Yeah, and I think that since the two sides were of differing opinions, there have been two versions of that meeting. I happen to feel pretty strongly that one person at that meeting spoke truth, and it felt like that was a we're going to kick your ass meeting, and you better take this crap sandwich we're trying to feed you. And that's just it's not how my style of business is,
yeah.
and I just don't like that. And it was pretty clear that there wasn't really an intent to collaborate. There was an intent to dominate and control and own.
And then I feel like they put up the facade of a vibe so they'd have some extra bargaining power to go to the table again to try to sign a letter of intent.
And that's when all that went down. So that was probably going down during 22, and so that prompted, after we overcame all that noise and succeeded at the end of 22 with the Columbus event, that is what I think brought us to the table to say, okay, let's work this out. And I think we really wanted to work that out. I don't think they ever wanted to work that out. I don't think the PPA ever intended to let MLP exist in any meaningful way, even though they signed a agreement to work with us.
Well, they really, my understanding of the letter of intent, the PPA got 20% of the league and 4 teams, and at the time, it was worth, the teams were worth more than what you paid, but not nearly what they're worth now.
Yeah, and actually, I thought that the deal was so favorable in their favor that they would cease to try to, murder us and kill us and make us go away and be the only game in town. Because one of the premises that I believe, and if you just look, there are a lot of new team leagues coming in sports that used to be solo sports.
Yes.
Because the reality is you can't own people. And you can sponsor people and you can support people, but you can't own them. And you can't really create a value out of a person. But if you create a brand and a name and a team and you get people on that team, you can create something of value that's that's supportable and watchable, and fans get engaged with it. And so I really think that team concept, at the time, the imputed value of the league, based on, at that time, I think they were selling teams for roughly $6 million. And so if there were 24 teams, there was a couple $100 million valuation of the league plus the teams.
Are you talking? You're not talking about when they signed the letter of intent, but when it was time to actually put the letter of intent in place, right? When they were actually turned it into a contract like a year later.
I guess just looking at the framework of what that deal would have given them, I think that deal was worth a significant premium to what the PPA tour would have been worth to me. Because
yes.
I think tours are valuable, but not as valuable. You can't get all the support of the LeBrons and the Tom Bradys and the Lil Waynes and all the people that teams like ours have brought into a tour. Where is there a place for them to engage?
Exactly.
So I actually think, other than what the PPA has done, is relied on celebrity play around the events, which is fun. And, like at the Nationals this year, I unfortunately didn't get to watch the celebrity match because I was indoors playing my 8th, 9th, and 10th singles match of the day, while on the next court over on the other side of the wall was the exhibition that I could hear the cheering. And I really wanted to watch Scotty Scheffler play pickleball, but I got stuck on the court till 10:30 at night and missed it.
You got a few national titles that were there, right? Don't you?
I've got one national title and one gold, one silver.
Okay. All right.
And a lot of losses.
Yeah. So, you don't have very many losses. I'm not going to let one go by. So, my understanding was when they first signed the letter of intent, maybe the teams had gone from what you paid up to like $1 million each, and the 20%. I think the enterprise valuation was a lot lower than it was a year later when it was time to actually move forward, and we go into this thing where they start signing players to contracts.
I think the values went, $100,000 to, $1 million to $3 million, and then they were creeping up on the $6 million range at about that time.
And so you were very instrumental in bringing in some big name people into the league that really, remember, it was all over the news, Sam. It was like MLP's bringing Tom Brady, MLP's bringing Drew Brees, LeBron. Were you one of the innovators or the first ones to bring that in?
No, and in fact, I don't know famous people. They don't hang out with me. I'm just a schlub. And so the other teams were doing that, and I was on the sidelines with my partner and I, and after seeing all these guys come in, it became apparent to me that the real way to create fan engagement, build a brand, was to do that. And I knew I didn't really have the chops to pull that off. So I had met Evan Florsch and Ted Moskowitz. Back in, I guess it was late 22, they hosted a fundraiser in my backyard, and they actually raised $5 or $10 for Matthew McConaughey's charity doing a MLP style pickleball event in my backyard. And I realized that these guys had the hustle, had the chops to be good partners. And so at that point in time, I engaged with them, and the auction, they were more or less auctioning off the last couple of unsold teams at that point in time. So we didn't know what the price was going to be, but we kind of had a band of what we thought it would be. And so when they approached me, I set a value that I thought was just a little bit lower than those, what the auction price would be. We signed a letter of intent in December of last year, or I guess it may have been more than an LOI. It was a binding deal, so that they could go out and build their syndicate. And so a lot of people saw the July announcement of their new investors and all that happened to be like 2 days before the war broke out this summer. And the reality is I had entered into that transaction last December after we had the peace treaty worked out, and I thought we had smooth sailing scheduled for, a year or two, and just assuming that everybody would be, straight up and close the deal. And my thinking at the time was, again, my banker risk management strategy was, hey, I'm in the money on this, but you can't pay bills with appreciated assets. You can only pay bills with cash. And I actually thought that these guys were such good partners to have and would do so much for the league and the franchise that I was better off owning a smaller piece of a bigger pie than a big piece of a small pie. And so that was my assessment at the time. I never thought we'd be where we are today in this nasty land with we may merge, we may not merge, and if that happens, great. If it doesn't, different course. But that wasn't even on my mind at the time. I really did it to better our franchise because we were going to lose the arms race from a branding perspective and fan engagement by not having good partners.
And I think you talked about that the people that owned leagues that you were friends with before, they told you that you need to keep putting capital in every year. And I was on the way over here today, I was listening to Travis Rettenmeyer and Grant, I guess they own the Florida Smash. They were saying that it's basically, they're estimating it's about $1 million a year now to keep your team going.
Yeah, and it kind of depends. I think they have decided to keep ownership of their team and not
Spread the risk.
seek outside capital, and also they haven't monetized their brand at all. And so if you sit, I think the old MLP style, you could just sit there, do the bare minimum, draft, try to win, be good, but not really actively manage and optimize your franchise value and your team's brand, and just sit there. And because scarcity and there was excess demand and not enough supply, the price went up. And so you could sit there and just kind of coast. And those days are over. And so now we're in an environment where you're going to have to step up and either write checks or promote your business and increase its engagement to where you can get sponsor dollars flowing in to offset some of those costs. So yeah, you have a choice. And then I think, and I can't remember exactly who's on which list, I think they opted not to do the buy-in into Premier.
And so they're
staying
Challenger.
down in Challenger, which will keep their costs lower. And then they can just try to work their way into Premier over the next few years.
The Challengers didn't have to come up with any money.
I don't believe so.
And then I guess through that, the 12th team on the auction, everybody in Premier had to come up with $400,000 each. All right. And so.
But now you really do. If you bid enough to like go into Premier, you needed to be ready to do the next two checks after that, because the next check is they're going to auction the draft picks. And so you
that's how they're going to determine 1 through 12.
I believe there's an auction on the draft picks, and so it's like making a bet in Las Vegas on a poker hand. You better have enough chips to
right, so you don't have to fold.
Keep betting. And so you can choose. Well, I don't know why you'd buy into Premier and then not want to optimize your outcome. And then there's a second, and I gotta admit, I don't. I let my partners do all the primary league dealings, and so I'm always a couple weeks behind on stuff because I got a lot of things going on in my day business. And so I think then you get a $500,000 salary allowance, and you can match that with another $500,000, which you have to fund. And so there's a series of checks that you will need to write if you want to be the New York Yankees and be a big salary team and try to win. But I love the movie Moneyball.
Yeah,
there's something to say for playing Moneyball and being smarter and spending less. And so I'm not sure which strategy we'll take, but we're in it to win it. We didn't show up just to get our participation trophy.
Yes. So you do have some big name investors, don't you? Like that people recognize. What are some of those?
We've got four really of the. We didn't go for the Brady and LeBron marquee names. Well, we got Scotty Scheffler.
Oh, great.
And so he's the marquee of golf today, and a great guy, and he loves pickleball. And we went after people who really are engaged in pickleball. So on the NFL side, we got Micah Parsons, Myles Garrett, Bijan Robinson, and C.J. Stroud, who are all
they're killing it.
Four really good, like first and
they're
second
killing it this year.
People.
Yeah.
And I got to admit, when the Ranchers guys got with the collective, and we had all the NFL guys here in town. I think it was in July doing their workout week, or there's a name for it, and I forget the name. They had a $10,000 prize money pickleball tournament, and those guys were totally in it. I mean, the guys that lost were pissed.
Yeah.
But as they were warming up and playing their games, they were having so much fun, and it was kind of interesting to see a bunch of, I think Micah Parsons is the fastest human being I've ever seen. He is athletic as all get out. And just to see all these guys in one room playing pickleball was really, and we only had one court at the collective up North Austin. And so it was like fast games with them. And it was fun watching those athletes pick up pickleball fast.
So they came in. Usually, they probably have like a group or an agent or something that helped them kind of negotiate whether this was a good deal for them.
Yeah.
And then, and they did it because they love pickleball. And for a while, it seemed like it was really trendy. it was really the hot thing to get own part of an MLP team.
Well, and I think in general, athletes realize that they have a limited lifetime of earning capacity, and if they're smart, they'll, you can't buy part of an NFL franchise if you're in the NFL. And so they're looking for low ticket items in other growing sports where they can, extend their brand.
Do you communicate at all with those players?
I don't, but the Ranchers management team does.
Okay. And when this started, where there started becoming a signing war and the letter of intent kind of blew up, do those kind of people, do their agents start making phone calls and asking questions, or do they just sit back and kind of let it fall?
There is a lot of communication between Ted, Evan, and Nancy and the management team and the investor group. A lot of the athletes were brought in by their agents, and their agents are in on the deal too. And then we've got some country music guys, Morgan Wallen and I always forget. I think it's Zach Bryan. There's a couple of Bryans, and I always get the wrong name. And Kendra Scott's in too. And so there's a lot of communication with them. But at the end of the day, they're not there to get in our day-to-day business of all the noise. And, this is just typical startup crap. It happens to software startups. This is no different, just a little more public.
Okay. So were you taken?
But back to when I signed with them, my true motivation was not, oh, gee, this deal with the PPA is going to blow up. We're going to get in this, salary war. I looked a year ago and said, what could go wrong here? Well, the worst thing that could happen is I do a crappy job. When we started the year, we thought we were going to be promoting the top 12 teams and relegating the bottom 12 teams. And I looked forward a year and said, well, I feel pretty good about my skills as a manager because I was coming off 11th place to first place to third place. Mm-hmm. So I didn't get stupid overnight.
You proved your mettle.
But there was lotteries, draft position, luck. And I just said, if a year from now and we're number 13 and we get relegated, the value of my franchise is not as good. So I looked at it, and as it turns out, there was a recent soccer team that was getting relegated from third to fourth level of EPL that was under contract to be bought, and the buyer wanted a 60% discount for the relegation. And so I think in general, there is a substantial relegation penalty to the franchise value. And I literally just said the time to take some chips off the table and strengthen the franchise is before I know my lottery position, before bad things happen. And then I got 9th pick out of 12 in the lottery.
It's a snake draft.
It's a snake draft. And some people have done really well from, like, I think one team was in the 12th slot and did well, and it may have been the Breakers, but somebody traded slots with them, so there was a little bit of noise there. But in general, especially in Premier, it's hard to win from a late draft pick. I mean, if you get Ben, you got a better shot of winning than if you don't get Ben.
Yeah.
And there's only one guy that gets the number one pick. And so the only thing that it all went not the way I thought it should have last year was when I got the 9th slot in Challenger draft. I opted to go Challenger first because so much was changing. I was like, I'd rather save my Premier slot till second half of the year. Just want to see more data. And so we got a 9th pick in the Challenger draft. I thought the fair thing to do in the second half of the season was just invert. Because a snake draft is an inversion.
Right. So you go from 9 to 3.
Yeah. And so that seemed fair. Well, management of MLP thought another lottery ball pick was fairer. And I'm like, so getting screwed twice is more fair than getting screwed once and unscrewed the second time.
Yeah.
So I didn't agree with that. But at the end of the day, as things have played out, it didn't matter because we've gone away from the promotion relegation into the auction format. So I was unhappy, but not unhappy enough to be, pissed enough to do anything stupid or get really mad. And then we got an 8th pick the second time around. and the problem was it was unclear at the beginning of the year how it didn't specifically say we were going to invert the draft, which to me seemed logically obvious as the fair way to treat every team the same way.
So when you say management decided, there's a board and
yeah, this is more of a management versus a board decision. This was Brooks and Steve. And that's, but at the end of the day, I disagreed with Steve a lot of times, and he turned out to be right. I just disagreed with him here. I don't think he was right on this one. I think I was right. But, you win some, you lose some. And if you want to control everything, then don't ever do deals with other people where other folks are making your decision for you.
Let's fast forward a little bit to when it becomes clear that this letter of intent for a merger is not happening and there's a signing war.
Yeah.
Did you find out about it like everybody else? Did you get a heads up? How did you find out that this was going on?
I think I heard about it when the PPA in Kansas City started off, and that was I heard about it a day or so later after all the players were talking about it. So I didn't know it had happened, but I didn't in the beginning, I didn't think it was a horrible idea. The way it started, where it went to ended up being not how I would have liked to have seen it play out. But the problem is you got to be careful when you start fights with people of what the second, third, and fourth blows in the fight are.
Yes. So so you found out just like everybody else, kind of at an event.
And I wasn't at the event, but I was seeing traffic about it online and texts and emails.
So what was going through your mind? There's obviously like this big thing going on. You've got an interest as a team owner. Do you call other team owners? Do you get, Steve or Brooks on the line? Do you talk to your investors? What or you just sit back and watch?
Well, we started having calls right away, and there was some consternation among the owners who were some unhappy with this, some knew about it and were participating in it. So there was different level of engagement and reaction to it. And some people were like mad that it took so long for them to hear about it. And we're like, this started yesterday. We're on the call today. So it was like a day delay. It wasn't like weeks or months. I think what ended up happening was different. I've been in the venture finance business for 20 years. And so I, as the senior lender, was always sitting on top of the equity stack. And I know I don't understand all the terms and conditions of equity and why people do, but basically some people take opportunities when bad stuff's going on in a business deal to take advantage of that bad thing to drive an agenda that favors them over others that maybe don't have as big a checkbook as they do. And it just seemed like in all this that some people saw opportunities to either drive their agenda or make more money for themselves at the expense of others. And so, that's what happens in fractious periods when, the bullets are flying.
Yeah, and in the court of public opinion, it seems like they're putting all the blame on Steve Kuhn, and my understanding was that this was definitely not his decision all on his own. Do you know anything about that?
Over the last few months, as I brought the new investors in, they had significantly more skin in the game than I did. And while things were smooth sailing, I stayed as the main point of contact with the league and handling everything because I kind of had the history, knew all the players. And so there came a time after the battle started where I literally raised my hand to my partners, and I was like, you guys have got to get involved here, because it was getting complex. It was legal. And I literally said to them, you don't want me making decisions that are affecting your money now that you have so much. So I've taken a back seat. I knew generally what Steve was doing. I don't know that I knew to the dollar amount what was going on. And so I knew a battle had been started. I don't think I knew that the nukes were flying.
So you're aware that MLP has a board. They have I think a 5-person board.
Yep.
And my understanding in talking to some other principals is that the board actually voted to disintegrate or not honor the letter of intent and start writing player contracts. Have you ever heard anything like that?
I do not know that. So I was never that close. And if I would say, as a team owner, the only kind of beef I really have is that while I knew certain things in general that were going on, the information flow to us owners was less than optimal. There were financial disclosure. There was a lot of things in hindsight that could have been done better from a just business management perspective.
Did the owners have any type of organization together? Did you ever, you know how like the NFL works? They have the owners have one thing and then they deal with the league separately.
We didn't, because at the time the dollars were relatively minor. This wasn't, you're dealing with guys that own NBA franchises, and this is, a couple million bucks.
Yeah.
So it really wasn't, it was a de minimis investment to most of these other guys. It wasn't to me, but it was to them. And the only other thing is, it seemed to me at various times that we couldn't even have a conversation among us owners, because the minute we talked about anything real, certain owners were going to bloggers and podcasters and people on the other side and spilling their guts. And it was almost like, if you want to have if you can't have spies on your own team telling your opponent what your next move is going to be, because then they have time to counteract it and jump out in front of it. And, there were times when I was learning things about us before our MLP calls from my son. And
watching podcasts.
Matty Pickles was getting phone calls from people, and he'd say, "Hey, I actually I went on one of the owner calls, and I said, hey, look, I just want to tell you guys, my son is Matty Pickles, and I don't tell him jack."
Oh, that's your son, Matty Pickles?
Matty Pickles.
I didn't know that was your son.
Yeah, Matt Klitch. And the world's worst pickleball player, but he's got a really good podcast.
He's got a good podcast, yeah.
And he's not that bad. He won a 3-5 tournament the other day, but I had to tell him, guys, we need to keep our mouths shut, because I'm hearing stuff from my son that I haven't even heard from our ownership or our management team yet. So somebody needs to shut their yaps. And so us owners were our own worst enemies through a lot of this process. And when you had 24 owners, and they're all successful business people, and then they have, syndicates within. You basically got 100 people with 100 opinions, and it's impossible to herd those cats in one direction at the same time. So it was a very challenging thing for the league to manage.
I guess if there was more money at stake, people would hold their cards closer to the vest and all. But it just seems, I've heard you speak, and you speak with a lot of affection towards Steve Kuhn. Sam really likes Steve Kuhn. We've played with him. I've got a lot of affection for him, and he's just been lambasted in all over the place. Not by the players, though, a lot of the times, because I think the players know that he was really super straight up with them, and it's the other faction that they can't trust. But even the league, though, is sending out information stating that this was like all his action, and my understanding is that's not factually correct.
I don't, I think you're probably right, but I don't know you're right. it's not that I'm trying to like hem and haw. I just, you're a lawyer. I've been deposed enough times, and there's a good chance this deal could end up in litigation. I don't know.
You're right. Okay. Well, why don't we? Well, let me ask you a question. So now we don't know if a merger is going to happen.
Yep. I think we'll know in the next 2 weeks.
So you've got. I think we come back to square one, where Connor Pardeau is negotiating players' contracts, MLP player contracts. So he's kind of got control. So I almost feel like it's come back to square one to that first meeting when Stephen Brooks went and saw Tom Dundon and they kind of have those other guys kind of have the upper hand again.
And this is why this is a particularly tricky time to be having this conversation, because whatever we say here is going to be memorialized forever, and we'll be wrong. Because there probably really are maybe 3 or 4 different potential outcomes here, and right now, I honestly don't know which way it's going to go.
What, as an owner of a successful team, and something that I know.
Well, formerly successful team. I wouldn't call our results this year successful, but thank you for flattering me.
Well, you've done really well with it. You're one of the smartest guys I know, and I know you've come out. However it turns out, you're doing great.
Well, thanks.
What would you like to see? Would you like to see a merger go through, or how would you like to see this unfold?
To a fault, sometimes I tend to look past my own interests and look at the greater good here. And so I know Ben and Anna Lee and them want to see a unified tour structure, because they can kick everybody's rear, and they don't want to beat inferior competition by having 2 tours with, separation between church and state. They want a unified tour. But I don't know if things were left up to, if you look at the history of how the PPA was operating up through this year, a few players at the top were making bank and killing it, and everybody else was not doing particularly well. And I'd like to see us go back to. I'd prefer to see a system where the players had freedom; they could play on the tour that they wanted. I think the PPA has the better tour for the top players. The quality of the pickleball is at a higher level than the APPs. I think there's a role for the APP to play. They're the smartest guys in the room, staying out of all this, watching the nukes fly and just, keeping their head out of the way. And so I'd like to see, I'd like to see, I'd be okay with the merger going through, as long as there is the PPA tour, there's MLP. I think it only needs to be 6 or 8 events. It doesn't need to be 15 or 20 events. It could be a little bit smaller and limited, because I do think people want to see the individual play. I think the team play was a good offset or add-on to the individual play. And then, the APP can be the proving ground for newer, younger players, or a few players that, don't want to fulfill a full tour obligation to the PPA can go part-time on the APP tour, and you get enough of those, then APP has a good product, PPA has a good product, MLP has a good product, and the players have choice and can optimize their freedom, their lifestyle, and their income potential. That's what I'd like to see, but that ain't happening.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it. Do you think that the game is headed in a direction that ultimately will be self-sustainable and can pay players really well, and that will have butts in the seats and will get the live stream numbers up?
That's a really good question. I've been told that one organization did a scientific third-party survey of pickleball players, and that 97% of them didn't know who Ben Johns was.
Right. Well, we talked about that, Sam, in one of I guess, we only had one other podcast. But I think that's kind of the brilliance of bringing on a Jack Sock.
You were talking with Zane about that. I think that's a good strategy, but honestly, this is a unique sport. I don't play football. finally I've gotten smart and quit playing basketball. I don't play baseball, so I watch them. Do I want to watch the same sport that I play all the time? And so, and pickleball is such a nuanced sport. Its nuance is lost when you go from 3-dimensional in person to 2-dimensional on a TV box. And so, what I love about pickleball as a tennis guy is, let's just say I'm back at the bank working the last 35 years. I get a whomping, when I get to senior vice president, I get 4 weeks of vacation a year. And so I gotta spend those 4 weeks wisely. Well, I'm gonna spend 2 of them doing family stuff, or maybe 3. So I maybe got a week of vacation due. So do I go to Wimbledon to watch tennis, or do I go play some USTA national tournaments? And so I gotta pick one or the other. Pickleball let me do both. I think where the sport is really special and really unique is I love going to tournaments and again watch the pros play while I'm not playing, and it's kind of fun. And there've been times when Zane will come by my court and like hassle me while I'm playing, or I'll call a timeout and he'll give me a few pointers. And so I think pickleball is special, has something special. The jury's out whether it's scalable, and the only way it scales, I think it scales really well in person, like the stadiums at MLP Nationals. The stadium was full. The PPA, their center courts there's on final Sunday, there's not a seat in the house. So I think in person it does really, really well. But I just don't know whether you have to play it. Like, I now can watch a match on TV and I get it because I've been burned by those shots myself. But until you get to like being a 4-0 or 4-5 or higher level player, you don't get the nuance of the sport, like how good these guys really are.
I think that, like, with the influx of different venues that are popping up, it's going to give people opportunities to play. And I know that the amateur play here in the Austin area has gone up dramatically. The level of play has gone up dramatically.
Yeah.
And that only has
And I'm really excited about that place in Fort Lauderdale.
Oh, yeah.
The Fort.
Uh-huh.
That looks cool.
Yeah. I mean, it looks like next year is going to be the year where all of these venues are going to start opening up. Yeah. And once that happens, everybody's going to have a place to play, and then the level just going to keep going up. I mean,
I agree. And then the question is, are people going to take their personal experience watching in person and then start watching it more online? Because I haven't seen the latest numbers on, PPA in San Clemente or MLP in San Clemente to see what the YouTube. I know while I was watching it, the stream numbers were, 5,000-ish.
5,000-ish, yeah.
But I don't know what the tail is on that, whether people watch it not live afterwards.
So we're in Austin right now, and Austin is crazy for pickleball. A lot of the pros live here. There's a total shortage of courts.
Yep.
You just opened another Austin Pickle Ranch. Would you tell us a little bit about what you've opened, what you're going to open, and some of your thoughts behind doing so?
Sure. I started down this path in 2019, bought the land in 20, and it took me almost 3 years to get the city to approve my site plan. And that happened in May of this year. And in the meantime, I got so frustrated at not being able to build more courts, and some of my neighbors got frustrated too, at all the play on my court. And so one of the guys on my team, Connor Byrne, who you probably have played with in town, he was helping us with some of our development activities, and he suggested we look at parking garage. And so we went and we started looking at a few, and the first one we really made a outreach to was where we're open now, downtown in the Heartland Plaza. And so a couple of things have happened. One is interest rates have gone through the roof. So prime is now 5 points higher than it was a year and a half ago. And so that has really hurt the real estate market. And if you think about it, if you're buying an office building, you're buying a bond. It's an income stream, just like a bond,
right,
but it has an asset underneath it.
Correct.
And when rates go up, bond prices go down. Well, add to that, with the pandemic, all these businesses have learned you don't have to be in the office
Correct.
to work. And so office occupancy is down. So their income is down, and then the cap rates have gone up, which means the value has gone. They've had a double hit. So now all of a sudden, we're finding that we're getting a lot of phone calls from office building owners saying, "Hey, can you help us get our project income up and make us a more attractive place?" So we're looking at a number of other properties to do more rooftop pickleball, but I gotta say it's really, really hard. We're in Texas. It's hot here in the summer.
Right.
That's a really hot environment up there. There's usually no utilities, and so it ain't easy. There's a lot of engineering, legal, and other challenges to do. So I don't recommend you going out and trying to do commercial rooftop venues
You're
yourself.
saying you have a wide moat.
Well, it's not real wide, but it's hard enough that there are some gators in our moat. And
Yeah.
I don't know if I would have done it if I knew all the gators in there, just like developing my own land. But what I'm finding is I think the economics for me are more favorable building on other people's already developed property where I don't have to put in the utilities, I don't have to put the roads in, I don't have to build parking. All the base conditions are there. So all I have to do is turn something that's already semi-hard, semi-flat into a well-lighted, well-constructed facility. And I think we've done a really good job on our rooftop of making that a hospitable place. But that's only the first part. So yeah, you can build courts. Then you got to operate them. You got to run them. You got to program them. And we're here on a rainy day, and I used to love rainy days because my yard saved me running my sprinkler system. I hate rainy days now because my meter stops running on my income from people using our courts, and so what I would prefer is once a week to have a 3-hour gully washer to clean off my courts, and then I can go clean off the water, and we can play for the next week without rain. But unfortunately, Mother Nature's undefeated, so I don't get what I want.
It seems like you could avoid some of that with an indoor facility, and there seems to be a real shortage of indoor facilities in Austin. There's been so much talk about some popping up, and yet I think there's only one. There's one that opened up out east,
Yeah.
out Springdale or something.
It's hard to charge that much for memberships. I mean, you pretty much have to charge out the roof to sustain an indoor facility here in Austin, especially.
Well, Tim might think it's the city, right? Aren't they difficult to deal with?
Well, our city, because of its environmentalist bent and its desire to control every aspect of land development down to, well, I'll just give you, for instance, we leased 6 acres over on Pleasant Valley in East Austin. It's a vacant tract with a bunch of derelict concrete slabs from buildings that have been torn down, that burnt down. There are hypodermic needles all over. It's a homeless camp, although the property owner has security and tries to keep it clean, but you can't protect things 24 hours a day. And so this piece of land was just a really desperate piece of dirt looking for something to do. We went to the city and asked for permission to put pickleball courts up, and they declined us, and they said no. And their reason was that this is in an overlay district, meaning a special zoning district. They are so prescriptive in what you can and can't do in these overlay districts and in the general zoning. There were no residents that would have complained about the noise. It's on a busy, loud street. It's pretty close to the flight path, and outdoor recreation was a prohibited use. And so I just sit here and I go, I can put courts over in West Austin where the rich people live. And I went and I looked. This is a low-income census tract. And the city banned me from putting pickleball courts in a neighborhood where I could provide cheaper courts for low-income people to get them active in the sport. And part of my research, and here the SFIA that does all this data, if you read the report, they put out annually, it should be coming out in January again with the new numbers of participation. In America, we have an exercise problem. Wealthy people who make over 100,000, only 13% of them are inactive. People who make under 25,000 per capita, 39% are inactive. I personally, as a lifelong committed exercise guy, I think the only thing that's got me through, having to, help my parents, in their aging years and sickness and going through my cancer and all that stuff, exercise is like, it's the magic drug.
And it's great for you mentally as well.
It's kept my sanity. It's
Yes.
kept me physically healthy. And here, I got a city, well, let me put pickleball courts in that I can provide to lower income people in their own city. And it's, if you look at our city council makeup, I think since we've gone to single member districts, we probably have a predominant representation from lower income areas today versus 30 years ago. And they write rules that stick it to their own people. And I'm just, you can complain about it, but nobody does anything and it doesn't get fixed. And then my experience, the city who later corrected their error, they had an unelected technocrat in the environmental service division who decided that he was going to override all the data in the city's GIS system and say that there was a river on my property. And he single-handedly blocked me for almost a year, one individual. And then I was fortunate enough to have a friend of a friend who is now our mayor, and Mayor Watson, before he was mayor, I reached out to him and said, look, I'm going to have to sue the city, and you can beat the city, but it costs money, and I'm not a lawyer. I can't represent myself. I'm going to have to pay legal fees. And so Mayor Watson, before he was mayor, reached out to the city manager, which is funny because he fired the city manager shortly thereafter. Mm-hmm. I guess he didn't, but the city council did. He made a phone call just going, can you look at this guy's case? And they looked at it, and another engineer looked at it and said, yeah, we screwed the guy. And they undid this one guy's thing. But
But it cost you a year.
It cost me a year. That's probably cost me $3 million. So you want to know why your rent's so high and why everything's so expensive in this town? It's because of that stuff. And
it doesn't make sense because they would raise revenue
if I was in
like
Plano or Arlington or anywhere else in Texas with a pro-business attitude, Chicken and Pickle is getting cities to give them land and give them tax abatements and give and give and give. And here, I got nothing. I got no help from nobody. And the gift I got was the county let me pay $500,000 to put a traffic light in on my street. And
that's why San Antonio's got so many more courts.
Yeah.
I mean, and
they're really turning it up next year. I mean, they're indoor courts, outdoor courts.
And here in Austin, I've met with the head of Parks and Rec, who is a very professional, good person, like nothing but respect for. But I forget the name of the park down by Westgate in 290. The neighbors approached their city council member and said, we want 2 pickleball courts on these tennis courts. And so the city council directed Parks and Rec to do it, and they did it. And then other neighbors were so mad at people from out of their neighborhood driving into their neighborhood to use their pickleball courts and playing loud music and raising heck that they complained to Parks and Rec and said, hey, shut down these pickleball courts. And so within a year and a half, they pulled them out. And the reality is our neighborhood parks are in neighborhoods. That's why they call them neighborhood parks. Mm-hmm. And there's homes within a couple hundred feet. And so our city does not want to make 100 people happy if one person's unhappy. They listen to the squeaky wheel. And so I don't think we'll ever get pickleball courts in a neighborhood ever again until, fortunately, we were talking earlier about the new paddles that are quieter.
Like Owl.
The Owl, which I've got one. I've hit with it. I've been very impressed with it. I will probably use it some because we have had some noise complaints on our property. on 6th Street, right by Mopac and right by the
Right.
railroad tracks, and in a very loud neighborhood.
Well, when you have Ben and Colin out there, I mean, that ball goes back and forth so fast when they're doing the kitchen drills. I mean,
Yeah,
I thought there was 10 people playing when I walked up one day.
they are different.
Yeah. So we're going to wrap up pretty soon, but I have a question for you. I mean, you obviously have fallen in love with pickleball. You've got an MLP team. You're building facilities. You're all in.
Yep.
Where do you see yourself in pickleball 5 years from now?
Well, I think within the next 5 years, we'll be operating over 100 courts, maybe 100 to 200 courts in the Austin area and maybe elsewhere. And I just want to bring the sport to more people. I love tennis, and tennis has a place in the ecosystem, but pickleball can serve more people at a lower cost and make more of an impact. And so before I leave this place in 20 or 30 or 40 years, I want to bring pickleball to more people and get them out having fun and getting exercise and living better lives.
Well, I think that's terrific. And I'm going to make a prediction right here. I think that we're going to see Tim Klitch in the Pickleball Hall of Fame before it's all said and done. Do you have anything?
Did you said you think you personally and your team will bring over 100 courts?
Our business.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah, because we've got 8 now. I would brag about signing the lease, but we have not signed the lease. But we should have 17 indoor courts and 5 outdoor courts at a location to be discussed soon in North Austin.
Very good.
And I think we've got plans for another 50 to 60 courts on top of that in the near term. And I think there's plenty of room for lots more courts. I think a lot of people love it, and then they get frustrated because they can't find a place to play.
Yeah.
And so we want to solve that problem.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Appreciate you coming
it.
out.
Good to see you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Long time no see. Sorry.
I got you.